This is Plant-Based Briefing. Cultivated meat can now be made with animal-free growth medium by Bronwyn Slater at vegansustainability.com. And I'm Marian Erickson. This is the Plant-Based Podcast, where I curate and narrate a variety of articles on plant-based and vegan living with permission in about 10 minutes or less every weekday. And Vegan Sustainability is one of the organizations I'm thrilled to have permission to read from. It's a free online quarterly magazine for vegans and non-vegans worldwide who are interested in the environment and sustainability. The magazine is rooted in a non-violent ethos that advocates love and compassion for all living beings. They promote a sustainable lifestyle that meets our own needs without compromising the ability of other species to meet their needs for present and future generations. They state that the production of animal foods is the single greatest threat to human society and to all species on the planet and to the environment. It's the main cause of biodiversity loss, deforestation, climate change, nutrient loading, and human illness. Bronwyn Slater, the author of this article, is a co-editor along with James O'Donovan, and he was on the Hope for the Animals podcast, episode 35, talking about regenerative agriculture, subsidies, and a climate-stable future. It's a really good episode that I recommend, and I'll link that in the show notes as well. So now let's get to today's plant-based briefing. Cultivated meat can now be made with animal-free growth medium by Bronwyn Slater at vegansustainability.com. Cultivated meat, also called cultured meat, lab-grown meat, or cell-based meat, could be a convenient, animal-free, and climate-friendly solution to the world's growing and potentially disastrous appetite for meat. More than 92 billion land animals are slaughtered globally each year. Apart from the unthinkable suffering they must endure, there's also a high environmental and climate cost to the rearing of animals, which we have written about consistently here at Vegan Sustainability magazine. Today, there are more than 150 companies working on producing cultivated meat and seafood. They're developing a variety of meats, including chicken, beef, pork, and lamb, and fish, as well as milk. If the meat-eating population could be encouraged to switch to this alternative, we could achieve significant cuts to the greenhouse gas emissions that are currently coming from animal agriculture. We could also reduce or even potentially eliminate the need to raise animals for food in the first place. Climate and environment. We know that urgent emissions cuts are needed to avoid irreversible climate breakdown. Cultivated meat uses significantly fewer resources and can also reduce agriculture-related environmental pollution. One study linked here showed that cultivated meat, if produced using renewable energy, could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by up to 92% and land use by up to 90% compared to conventional beef. Additionally, lab meat is made entirely without antibiotics, thereby reducing the risk of antibiotic resistance due to intensive animal farming, a serious threat to public health. Over the next few decades, cultivated meat and other alternative proteins are predicted to take a significant market share from the meat and seafood industry. If this happens, it will mitigate agriculture-related deforestation, biodiversity loss, antibiotic resistance, zoonotic disease outbreaks, animal slaughter, and suffering. How is cultivated meat made? To grow a piece of cultivated meat, two types of cells are needed: starter cells and a growth medium. Starter cells. Starter cells come from an animal. These cells need only be collected once in a process that is, according to an article in Sentient Media linked here, relatively painless for the animal. One animal could theoretically feed millions because the cells are capable of dividing indefinitely. Currently, most starter cells are sourced from living animals. In time, most starter cells will be sourced from cell banks. These cells are then grown in bioreactors in a process that is similar to what happens inside an animal's body. The cells are fed an oxygen-rich cell culture medium made up of basic nutrients such as amino acids, glucose, vitamins, and salts, and supplemented with growth factors and other proteins. The easiest products to make this way are those usually made with ground meat, such as hamburgers and chicken nuggets. Some companies are working on products with more structure, such as chicken breasts and steaks. These need a scaffold or structure for the cells to grow on. The scaffolds can be vegetable-based, or they can be made of animal products like collagen. Animal-free growth medium. Back in 2018, I wrote an article about cultivated meat in which I pointed out the need to extract, in the case of beef, cells from an unborn fetus of a slaughtered cow in order to produce fetal bovine serum, or FBS. FBS was originally the growth medium needed to produce cultured beef, This process is not only unethical, it is also expensive, and companies have been working hard in the intervening years to come up with alternatives to FBS as a growth medium. Nearly all cultivated meat companies are now trying to replace FBS by using recombinant proteins, strings of amino acids that have been genetically tinkered with in order to stimulate growth in the same way that FBS does. After lengthy research, plant-based and synthetic animal component-free (ACF) growth media have now been made available. While FBS-free growth media is quickly evolving for wide-scale production, the use of animal components cannot completely be ruled out for the entire industry. However, if companies can demonstrate success with animal-free options, then these could become the standard. Companies. In January of this year, Good Meat became the first company approved to sell FBS-free cultivated meat in Singapore. The company has also received approval from the USDA for its first poultry product, cultivated chicken, to be sold in the U.S. Another company, Upside Foods, demonstrated their own animal-free growth media in late 2021. Upside said it aims to start selling its cultivated chicken in restaurants in 2023 and in grocery stores by 2028. The Dutch cultivated meat company Mosa Meat also announced that they have moved away from FBS in their production. What happens over the next several years could eventually set the standard for the entire industry, and hopefully this standard will be animal-free. There are also a number of companies in the US and Canada working on cultivated pet food. The cultivated meat industry is certainly one to keep an eye on, and is definitely something to be optimistic about for the future. You just listened to Cultivated Meat Can Now Be Made with Animal-Free Growth Medium by Bronwyn Slater at vegansustainability.org. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson. I've done a number of episodes on cultivated meat. I'll link some of those in the show notes, or you can search for those if where you listen has a good search feature. If not, go to plantbasedbriefing.com/episodes, and there's a really good search feature there. Just put cultivated meat or cultured meat or alt proteins, and you'll see a ton of episodes come up. I'm also going to link a couple of documentaries. One is The End of Medicine as We Know It, which talks about antibiotic resistance or antimicrobial resistance. And the other is Meet the Future. It's a documentary about the birth of the cultured meat industry, and it's really eye-opening as well. It's interesting to see the transparency in this industry compared to animal agriculture. But of course, there is so much resistance to this industry, a lot of it coming from animal agriculture, of course, but also big pharma, because something like 70% of antibiotics produced by big pharma are used in animal agriculture. So they have a vested interest in making sure that animal agriculture, as it now exists, continues to exist that way. Anyway, important information, a lot to consider. Please share this episode with anyone who might benefit, and thanks for listening.